Jesus. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the One Book, One New Orleans March event. We're in the virtual space tonight with Skye Jackson, author of our 2026 selection, Libre. Welcome, Skye, and welcome everyone else. We're so excited to have you here spending some time with us this evening. So, I'm sure all of you are relatively familiar with One Book if you found us in this space. But just in case you're not sure what we do, we choose one book every year and we encourage everyone in the city to read that same book at the same time with the idea that we're going to come together as a community through this shared reading experience. And then we try to create different spaces for that coming together to happen, whether it's uptown, whether it's in the Ninth Ward, whether it's in Lakeview, or whether it's here online with all of you tonight. So hopefully the virtual space will be a friendly and welcoming space for all. On that note, just a quick thing, we don't tolerate any kind of discrimination or harassment, so let's not do it. Let's be cool with each other and have a good time tonight. So, on that note, I think what I'm going to do is just get out the way and let you all and the author do your thing because that's what we're here for. We're not here to listen to me talk about community. We're here to talk about poetry. All right, Skye, go ahead.
All right, awesome. I'm so glad to be here with y'all. This is amazing. I'm thinking what we're gonna do is I'm gonna read a few poems and I'm gonna
You
open
good?
up for questions. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Perfect. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me or am I breaking up?
You're good.
Good?
Loud and
Okay.
clear.
Okay, cool.
Loud and clear.
Yay, sweet. I'm gonna read a few poems and then open it up for questions, and I will just follow that format, like read some poems, talk, read poems, talk, etc. And just see where it goes. And I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have just about, poetry, about life, about, publishing, however I can be helpful to y'all. All right. Sweet. Okay. So these poems are from my book Libre right here. The first one that I'm going to read is called Ice Cream Sam. I feel like I haven't read this poem in a really long time, so I'm going to read it. Ice Cream Sam. Ice Cream Sam picks me up down on Burgundy. It's the Wednesday before Christmas when I climb into his truck. His Seventh Ward accent drips in my ear like molasses, sweet and slow. He tells me about his cats, the flavors he creates and pours his soul into. He names one, Butter Off Dead, and I love him already. As we arrive at the restaurant on Esplanade, Cafe Degas, all lit up and yet still dim. I'm the only Black person in the restaurant, of course, except for our waiter, who seems distant and does not keep my glass filled with wine. Ice Cream Sam orders the whole menu for us: mussels, sweetbreads, and French onion soup. He sips sparkling water, gave up the booze and drugs years ago. But later, when we stand in line to ride the coaster at City Park and the icy wind bites our cheeks, I realize he still loves a good rush, gets giddy at the thought of it. He puts his big calloused hands inside the belly of my fluffy coat. Tonight, on that coaster, we'll swirl together round and round until we are cold and sweet, just like his French gourmet ice cream. And that's Ice Cream Sam. Oh gosh. This next poem is called Umbrella. On just another day of relentless rain in New Orleans, I studied the girl planted in front of my register for a long time. Gray, hoodie drenched, her dark eyes refused my glance, but somehow the red paper carnation tied around her wrist, dry as linen hung on a clothesline. She picked up an umbrella from a basket on the floor and walked slowly to the door. I stopped her as she stood 1 foot beyond the threshold. Are you gonna pay for that? I asked, trembling. She looked up at me, brown eyes endless as the earth, her skin deep chicory like my own. She smiled at me through closed mouth and never opened her lips once to speak. She handed me the umbrella tucked underneath her arm. The flower on her wrist opened slightly in the wind as she walked out into the slaughter of rain. So those are the first two poems. Does anybody have any questions or comments or anything of that sort? I'll also look at the chat too. Hi, Latoya. Good evening to you.
I want to know about Slaughter of Rain. That's such a distinctive turn of phrase. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that poem is situated in New Orleans, and I remember on that particular day it was raining so hard that the rain seemed it was like almost sharp, like the way that it was falling from the sky. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it was just pounding the sidewalk, and I just thought to myself, geez, like, it's almost like a slaughter of rain, and so I also think the word slaughter is appropriate there, because the young lady or the young girl in the poem, she's just trying to like protect herself from the elements, right? And the speaker is like sending her into it. And I think it reflects something about the speaker's guilt, and like having to be like, can you just like pay for that? Or, and not wanting to like lose their job, but also like the right thing to do is to let this girl take this umbrella, the moral right thing to do is that, and maybe risk whatever consequence comes with that. And so I just think I think that there are like layers of the slaughter that are happening in the poem. There's like the physical rain happening, but then there's also like this like you know, the emotional slaughter that I think capitalism sometimes forces us to like participate in, like, in terms of how we treat other people and ourselves and what we have to do, in those situations. So it just really felt like an appropriate word. And someone said it's appropriate for New Orleans rain, like, very much so, like crazy rain that comes out of nowhere and seems like it's never going to end, and you were like, I really don't want to go out in that right now. So yeah, that word just kind of I felt like it was an appropriate sort of turn of phrase to end the poem on, if that makes sense. So yeah, let me see if I'll read some more poems then. If y'all don't have any more questions, let's see.
I have a question.
Oh, sweet. Yes,
Yes.
Latoya.
And this is about the poem The Day I Was Born.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, what was your reaction when you were told that story?
Oh my gosh, I was like, Mom, why are you just telling me this like at 34 or 33? Like what are you, I was just like stunned. I was just staring at her like, what? Like I had gotten like pieces of the story throughout the years, but like not the whole thing. Um, it's interesting sometimes the things that like parents shield you from, like as a child, and then you get older and then it's like, here you go. And so I was amazed. I was amazed when she told me that. And I was amazed at like her strength and her ability to be like clear-headed in that moment because I think I would have been freaking out, you know. But she just kind of like her resolve is something that I think draws me into that poem, you know, and draws me into that story, you know, her kind of holding this doctor to this accountability, like, no, I'm not walking out of this hospital without my baby, you know, and I think particularly it resonates with me thinking about the mortality rate of Black women that go into the hospital, you know, to have babies and, you know, aren't believed by doctors or their pain is minimized or, you know, doctors are doing strange things, right? And so when I think of all of those things together, it just kind of, you know, sort of brings me to the heart of what the poem is about, in a sense. So yeah.
Did it change your relationship at all with your mother?
No, it
Yeah.
didn't change my relationship. I mean, I had more admiration for her,
Right.
for her bravery and her faith and her resolve, you know. I wasn't shocked because she's very resolute, you know, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like you know, that sounds like exactly how you would approach such a situation, you know. Before that, she would only tell me, "Oh, you know, we almost lost you when you were born," but she never told me like the rest of that, like what was actually what happened within the scheme of that. And so, I really love that poem because it's like a shorter poem, but it's like it seems to be saying a lot, you know, about the bond between mothers and daughters and you know the way in which sometimes we have to make these life or death decisions in these like unexpected moments, you know. So yeah, I think it probably just brought us closer.
That's beautiful. Thanks.
Of course, thank you for asking that question. I could read that poem next also. See, find it in the phone. Give me one moment. The day I was born. My father does not remember the day I was born. The events, I mean, questions that were asked of him, like when my mother's placenta burst like a supernova, and the doctor asked him, who would you like me to save, your wife or your daughter? After learning that my parents weren't married and that my father had no say in the matter, the doctor turned to my mother. We may very well lose the baby, he said. Who would you like me to save, you or your daughter? My mother closed her eyes, horrified her unborn child might not survive, as I began to drown inside her like one of those children lost in the dark of the river. When she turned to the doctor and said, we are both going to live. We are both going to live. And that's the day I was born. Thanks. Oh, hey, Deb. So glad that you're here with us. Oh, I have something in the chat. Okay, cool. All right. I guess I'll read another poem unless y'all have a question. Let's see. I love that. Say that last line twice. Once read it. Yeah. I think, you know, I always get comments about the fact that that's repeated. And I don't know why I decided to repeat it. I think it sort of makes it feel right. I think it feels right that it's emphasized there. What was your mom's reaction when she first read this poem? Oh my gosh, she loved the poem. She was like, "Oh my gosh, you wrote something about me." You know, she was really happy to to have a poem written about her. But I write about my family all the time because I feel like they're so interesting and I always get these stories and these experiences from them. And so, now my mom doesn't always love for me to write about her, but in this particular instance, she thought it was really cool. So I don't have your title. Oh, the title of the book. So yes, or the title of, I guess we're talking about the title of the book. Um, so the book's called Libre, and it is named after one of the poems in the book, which is called Libre. It's a prose poem. And I thought that it just sort of encompassed all that particular poem encompasses all of the themes in the book in this really lovely way. I did not set out to call the book Libre. I actually thought that it would change as I sat down with my publisher, as we like started to get into the manuscript and talk about themes and talk. I just knew it was going to be, I just slapped Libre on there like, okay, this is like, you know, the title I'm giving it right now. But I fully thought that it was going to change. And I remember with my first chapbook, I had another title in mind. And I was like, this is going to be the title. It's so great. It's perfect. Like I was gung ho. And the title was, the title was, I bet you think this poem is about you. That was what I wanted to name my chapbook. It ended up being named A Faster Grave. But I wanted to call it, I submitted it for this contest under the name, I bet you think this poem is about you. And I remember I remember my boyfriend at the time being like, did you like Google that title to see like if anybody else like has named their book that? And I was like, no. And then I Googled it and sure enough, there was like a poet out there. Then I was like, oh my God. I was like, what am I gonna do? So it was kind of like with Libre, I had like the opposite experience where I was like not too sure about the title, but then that ended up being the title versus the first time where I was like resolute about the title and then it ended up changing. So you never know with publishing, like there's always some kind of surprise, I feel like in store. I see Melissa with the hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi,
I can hear
Melissa.
you. Okay, I'm over here in Houston, Texas.
Oh
I'm a former New Orleanian. I'm born and raised there. So, but now I live over here. I teach British literature in high school, and we're on poetry right now. And I was just thinking, what is your method? Do you consciously think before you write it that which rhetorical strategies you want to use, or you just kind of write down whatever is on whatever you want to say on paper and just kind of switch the words around, or is it like what sounds right to your ear, or
gosh.
do you select like rhetorical strategies like repetition and stuff like that?
I don't want to think about that when I'm sitting down to write a poem. I just want to like get the poem out,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and or get like what I call the bones. Like
Okay.
let's get the bones down.
Mm-hmm,
Um, and then as I sort of go through my process, I begin to put meat on the bones. I begin to move things around. I begin to cut things out. I
mm-hmm,
start like doing my own little Frankenstein thing. Then towards the end of the process, I'm thinking about, okay, what about the repetition here? Is this working? Or another thing that I do is that after I get a draft that I really like a first or
mm-hmm,
second draft, I'll
mm-hmm,
record myself reading the poem so then I can
mm-hmm,
hear like how it falls on my ear and then I can
mm-hmm.
kind of catch where I'm like, ooh, that sounded kind of weird or ooh, that doesn't feel quite natural. And then I start trying to think about how to strategize and make things sound a different way or the way that I feel
Does it
them.
sound right? Mm-hmm,
Yeah, does it sound right? I remember like at UNO when I was doing my MFA, and you have to like prepare to defend your thesis, right? And I remember someone on my committee asking like, well, why did you like put that
mm-hmm.
there? Why
Right,
did that need to be there? And I'm like, because it sounded right. it felt
Yeah,
right,
and
but that's not like the answer people want. They want you to be like, well,
they want you to do some elaborate explanation of it.
yeah. They're like, well, they want you to be like, well, Ginsburg and blah, 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 did this and that. And I'm just like,
Hmm.
no, I felt it where I wanted to feel it. And this is like what I felt. And this is how I sort of crafted the poem. So, and like what I always want to do, I don't want to revise a poem to death so that like I lose the bones, like I don't
Hmm.
want to be like, okay, I've just lost the plot totally on this poem, like I've revised it to death and now it's just, but sometimes that's good, but it's not always good, like for me, it just has to feel right. And so the process is like a lot about feeling what's right, you know?
Another question I have, um, how much of an impact do you think technology and social media has had on creativity of um, just the creative population in general?
Mm.
That I've taught high school for about 15 years now, and I've seen that it's less and less. They want to put the time in, and I look at because I keep some of the work from previous years, and what I'm getting now in comparison to what I was getting then, it's like it might be in there, but they don't even want to try, or they don't have I want to say that maybe technology has to do with the impatience and the not want to sit down and write something. They just want to hurry up and do the activity, get the grade for me. And
Yeah, when it's about the process, it's not about the grade, it's about you going through it.
and do you think technology has had an impact on creativity in general?
Yeah, I was actually just having a conversation with a friend earlier this week about this book. He was telling me about this book called Open Sky, and this guy wrote that every time human beings create a new technology, we create a new danger, we create a new risk, right? So airplanes
Mhm.
are invented, but now people can die in plane crashes, right? Cars
Mhm.
get invented, now you can die in cars. You can, get carbon monoxide put in poisoning. Like every time we invent something there is a risk, there's a danger that we're inventing also. And I think technology is very much the same way. But the crazy thing is we can't see the risk when it's created, right? And so people
Mhm.
are like, oh, we've got this new technology, it's gonna make our life easier. But then there's like a trade-off that happens, right?
Mhm.
We've become slaves to convenience, and that's one of the costs of it. And so I also teach college students and I can see that as well, but a part of me
Mhm.
is kind of like I'm on one side where like this is such a strange world and I want to give them grace because everything's insane, like I can't
Mhm.
imagine being 19 right now. Like I'd be like,
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I feel so
Mhm.
bad for them. Like I want to like grab their little faces and just say like, I'm sorry. Um,
Mhm.
so I just kind of feel like people have to they have to show up how they have to show up. And
Mhm.
our responsibility as teachers, as educators is to meet that where we can meet it, you
Meet them where
know?
they are. Just kind
Yeah.
of meet them where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like trick them into the thing,
So
you
I see you're
know?
you're recording this. Is this something that I'll be able to get access to and maybe be able to show to them this meeting that we're having right now?
I think it's going to
Listen to
be
the
on YouTube, so you should be able to. But Megan, you could probably speak to that.
It sure will, Melissa. This conversation tonight and pretty much everything else we do throughout the year around this book will be on
mhm.
the One Book One New Orleans YouTube channel, and I'll
Mhm.
link that in the chat.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that question. It's something I think about all the time. I'm just like, what's going on? And but then you have the moments when they surprise you and you're just like, oh my God, like I was workshopping short stories with my students today. And these two stories I got and I was like, I was like, this is amazing, because you're so used to them phoning it in, It's just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
this could be fun if you actually care about it and like get invested on some level. And these students were, you could tell that they tried. They were like, the moment one of the students sat down in workshop, he was like, "What did you think about my story? Like, what did you think?" And I was like, okay, I know you're in it. You're invested, like we,
I may have to
yeah,
change my way of teaching them and presenting the information maybe to them to pull more out of them. I have outsiders that ask me, well, why don't they write and why don't they do cursive anymore? I'm like, they all have laptops. They don't have a reason to write in script. They type,
yeah,
they type, but they really don't have a reason to do penmanship, if that's what you want to call it.
yeah.
Um, but I feel like I'm getting less and less of those surprises, like what you're saying.
Hmm.
And I have had so many surprises, like, oh my God, they took it and ran with it.
Yeah.
And it may be just this group that I have, because I think they're the tail end of the COVID kids. So
Yeah.
they may have missed out on something along the way.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of back and forth trying to see, okay, what's going on here. I know technology is playing a part in it, but I haven't figured out how much of a part it's playing in it.
It's hard. And we're not going to know until like 10 years from now when
No,
we can look
no,
back, and like, oh, this generation was, it's hard to workshop that kind of thing in real time, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
And it's just like you just do that. Like I used to put a lot of pressure on myself, like, oh my God, but now I'm like, you know what? I'm showing up. I'm gonna be my best self. I'm gonna give them what I've got. And I'm not gonna internalize this because you can't. Like,
no, no, you can't. But thank you for that the insight, and I'm gonna see if I can find the video of this conversation, because I think it is important for them to see real people doing real things. It makes it more real to them.
Yeah, I think that
So,
does make a
and
difference.
I'm gonna go on and sign, because Friday I use my Friday times to do stuff like that. So that's what I'm
Yeah,
doing.
that's
So they're
amazing.
watching. We're watching.
That's very special. I feel honored.
Thank you.
Of course. Oh, I see Maureen jumped into the chat with the question, could the students be afraid of criticism because of technology? Is it because of technology? Is it because of social media? I wonder, I think there is less of an impetus to like want to jump into the fray. Like I remember assigning an argumentative essay to students and just being like, pick one side of the argument. And they're like, well, why can't we just like but I'm like, this is a skill you need to learn how to see a point through to its natural point of completion. Like I don't want to see you like sit on the fence. And so I think a lot of them are afraid to vocalize themselves and who they are because I think our landscape politically, sociologically is like so contentious. Nothing feels safe anymore. Voicing what you think doesn't feel like safe anymore, I would think. So I don't know. That's just like my 2 cents, but you know, it's very interesting and also horrifying at the same time. So yeah, Maria, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's definitely layered. There's layers to the madness in which we dwell currently. Of course. Does anybody have any other questions, or I can keep reading poems? Okay, I'll read this poem called Currency. I wrote this poem in Paris back in 2019. This was like the before times. Seems so crazy thinking about it now. Megan Holt and I were just talking about the before times. But this is a poem from the before times. It's called Currency. In Paris, even the violence is cinematic. In hot summer, shoes fly through the sticky air, tables launched like rockets, and blood-spattered shirts scream, "Witness this revolution." As I watch in horror, four men tear at one another, the blood on their teeth glistening like red melted licorice in the midday sun. A rush of black skin against black skin in the most physical war I've ever seen, up close, that is. And all this at the entrance of the train. I think, wow, this is just like New Orleans. And my boyfriend laughs and says, yeah, except there, they'd all have guns. And right now, the news would spread how at least 8 or more are dead. My American instinct forces me to duck and rush, to escape bullets that won't ever come. Then suddenly, all the tickets on the train are free, and we pass through the station with only our lives as currency. I think of a Twilight Zone episode when an alien said, "People are the same everywhere." And I agree, because in Paris and New Orleans, violence packs its bags, but never takes a vacation. That episode was right. The defenseless are still defenseless, no matter where you go. And that's Currency. I haven't read that poem in a long time. Oh, here's another Paris poem that's right after that one. It's called Under the Shadow of a Golden Clock. Um, this is about one of my favorite museums in Paris called Musée d'Orsay. I think I ended up at this museum because I was trying to go to the Louvre, but the line at the Louvre was like so crazy. I was like, absolutely not, you know? So I ended up at Musée d'Orsay and ended up with this poem. In Musée d'Orsay, I wander among the work of birth, see her paintings of maids bent over to wash linens, and a self-portrait of the artist, clad in brown and looking incredibly stern. But downstairs, hidden in a corner underneath the shadow of a golden clock, an exhibit devoted to Black models of the past. Jean Duval, the mistress of a poet, high yellow and in recline. And just past her, a painting of Ira Aldridge, the first actual Black person to play Othello on stage. Though the portrait shows him shackled and chained, he still glances up towards the sun. And I think of the moment he recited his lines to the crowd, and Alexander Dumas stood up and exclaimed, "I am a Negro too." And I whisper the words to myself. I stand hidden in a crowd of people rushing past me to see Olympia, the painting in which Manet captured what appears to be the first ever recorded side eye cast towards a white woman. And no one can see me but Josephine Baker, who looks down at me from an old recording, smiling, lips slicked, dark breasts bared, knees shimmying, with so much laughter in her eyes. I look up at her and whisper, "Sister." I look up at her and whisper, "Friend." And my boyfriend finds me lost and says, "I am so full. Are you ready to go?" And I look at him, ravenous, because I will never be filled, and I refuse to clear my plate. And that is Under the Shadow of a Golden Clock. Okay. Oh, I see a question in the chat from Megan. Some folks might not have the book yet, so they can't see that you write all in lowercase. Can you talk about your decision to do that? Yes, I'm happy to talk about my decision to do that. So, um, I'm trying, when I do that, when I write in lowercase, I'm operating in the tradition or the legacy of Black poets, such as Nikki Giovanni, Toy Derricott, Lucille Clifton, who all wrote their poems in lowercase. And so I'm sort of, I'm paying homage to that lineage, which is really important to me as a poet, and has influenced me deeply. And also, I guess, wanting to be a part of that somehow, to perpetuate that and push it forward. Um, for future poets. And so, yeah, for me, it's sort of an ancestral legacy thing. I also love the way that it looks. I love lowercase, you know, writing in lowercase letters. That's like when I'm writing in my journal or I'm writing a poem. I handwrite every poem before I type it up. It all starts out like that. And so, there are moments where I do capitalize things, but because if you're used to my writing, like, oh my God, I have to pay attention to this because, there's something special about this. So that's another way it can be a tool. And I remember like some people ask me like, oh, why don't you use like not capitalization, punctuation. People ask me like, why do you not always use punctuation? And a part of that is I think when I was in grad school, I was trying to challenge myself to be able to write effectively enough to not need it, which is quite a challenge. And so I sort of sometimes I'm assuring myself challenges and then trying to complete the challenges. So, yeah, thanks for that question, Megan. Melissa, I see that you have a question, or maybe was that from before the hand
I
raise?
know I'm driving, so that's why I have to stop to ask the question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
So all the lowercase is that's considered like a literary style, right? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, it is a literary style if author or poet chooses to use all lowercase letters. The
yes.
it's a I don't know if it's a coincidence, but I'm going to Paris for the first time this summer,
Oh, awesome.
and I'm wondering because I have plans to try to go to the Louvre. Am I going to be able to get in there, or is it really just that crowded?
Every time, I mean, okay, so I went to Paris this past summer and
Hmm.
I didn't get to go in the museum, but I have a friend who's French, and he was like, I've got a surprise for you. And he ended up taking me to a film screening at the Louvre. So
Hmm.
that was really cool. So sometimes you just get to go to like a cool event there, but if you try to go during the day, there's like so many tourists in the summer and it's insane. But you could just try to go and do it and see what happens.
Were you a guest artist there, or just visiting for like vacation or something?
The first time I went to Paris, it was for my book tour for my chapbook. So I
Uh-huh.
went there to like promote the book and do readings and
Hmm.
stuff. And then I wrote a bunch of poems there about Paris when I was there. And then my book, Libre, of course, just came out about a year ago. And so I took it back to Paris the summer after it came out to do more readings. And it felt appropriate to take it back there since there were so many Paris poems. And this summer, I'm supposed to go back as a guest artist for a summer program. So it will be my first time this summer going to Paris as a guest artist, but I also like have readings scheduled and events and things of that sort to do. So
So
yeah.
did you find Paris inspiring to write about?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Paris is just like it reminds me a lot of New Orleans. Like it's I feel like they're very much
People
sister
say that.
cities.
People say that. I find that hard to believe. I hope it's not too much like New Orleans.
You're gonna see, I mean, the
Some
culture, there's always
similarities.
something going on, people are hanging out, it feels very laid back. I mean, you're just sitting by the river, like drinking some wine and eating some cheese. It's just, it's just everybody's
Hmm.
hanging out. And that's the aspect of it
That's the
reminds
vibe.
me, yeah, or like I'm like, oh, when I go to Paris, I do the same thing that I do in New Orleans, which is like go to bars with my friends who are poets and drink wine and talk about literature, like I'm doing that in New Orleans. So it feels, and there's a lot of people from New Orleans that have moved to Paris. And so
Mm.
that feels, I'm like, okay, every time I go there, they're like, oh, have you moved here yet? I'm like, no, I'm just hanging out, y'all.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you'll make your own like conclusion about
There's
that.
some similarities to it. To New Orleans and Paris.
Definitely. There's definitely some similarities there.
And I think also because I'm like a lot older than you, my interpretation of Paris will be a little bit different than yours, probably.
Yeah, I think it's just like New Orleans. Like we all have a different New Orleans. We all have a different Paris. Like,
Mhm.
like we all have a different New York. We all have a different LA.
Mhm.
It's like those cities, they have so many different identities within the city,
Mhm.
which mean different things to all of us, and so I think it's going to be interesting to see which Paris finds you when you get there.
Mhm. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Melissa. Okay. Oh, a question in the chat from Ambada. Hi, Ambada. It's so great to have you here. All the poems you've read so far are very story-like. What is your relationship with stories and other genres? Do you write in other genres? Oh, I dabble, I dabble sometimes. I just had a short published this past summer, and I was really proud of that. So when I do write in other genres, it tends to be more sort of like nonfiction pieces or profiles, interviews, essays. I attempted or have attempted to start a novel, but I haven't put a lot of energy into it as of late. So yeah, I want to be dabbling in other genres, I used to write more short stories when I was younger, and then when I was at LSU, I had this horrible professor who told me that my stories weren't universal. I think I wrote a story about colorism, as I was experiencing it, but of a fictional depiction, of course, and he was like, people are not gonna be able to identify with your story. And I was like, it was like this very impressionable, you know student and trying to learn, and I just kind of stopped writing short stories after that, and so I think now as I'm getting older, I am getting back. I'm making my little creep back towards it, which is nice, it's just, it kind of speaks to the fact that teachers sometimes they hold so much power that they don't even realize they hold, like this ability to make you feel like you're going to soar or sink, and I think we all have to be so careful about how we approach students and the feedback we give them and how we say things to them, because that's something that has always stayed with me. You always remember the terrible feedback, that you get. You don't remember the high praise. You remember that guy who said that thing to you, and it's just you know. So yeah, you're right. It is the first rule of teaching, give some kindness, give some care, give some, criticism is good if it's something that you can do something with, right? Maybe instead of telling me that no one would identify with my story, he could have said something I think once you go through a few more processes of revision, it might be clearer to whatever, why do you have to make it almost like a personal thing, So it's wild. But apparently, I wasn't the only one he did that to, so I felt validation from that years later from other writers that were in my program that I spoke to who had him as a professor. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have any other questions. I'm checking to see if there are any hands raised or anything in the chat. Um, all right, let's see what else I have here. This poem is called hashtag Medusa was black, y'all. And it's an ekphrastic poem, which is a poem about a work of art. I was inspired by the bronze sculpture Perseus with the head of Medusa, in which Perseus, from the mythological story, is holding the head of Medusa, victoriously after having slain her. And I kind of went down a rabbit hole with this because I found out that Medusa was sort of originally conceived as a woman of color or a black woman. They said that her character was sort of based in African myth, which I was like, whoa, that sort of set that painting alive. I mean, that sculpture alive for me in a different way than I had perceived it before, particularly when I think about the story of Medusa, in which, she was a young maiden in the Temple of Athena and was turned into the creature of the stories that we read because Poseidon sexually assaulted her, And some versions of the myth say that Athena transformed her into a monster to protect her from future violations. And other versions of the story say that Athena turned her into the monster to punish her. So which one it was, we'll never really know. There's different interpretations of it, but I had all that in mind when I was writing this poem. Hashtag Medusa was black, y'all. After Benvenuto Cellini, Perseus with the head of Medusa, bronze sculpture. Perseus, hold my dead lips up close to your ear. Let me tell you a secret with my split tongues. Once, long ago, Poseidon held a fistful of my black locks, just like this. On the floor of the temple, fingers pulling at my scalp, he inhaled me, my body soft from lavender and holy oil. My robes, cast off and torn, spilled down over the altar, and even the candles dimmed in respect of my shame. My brown skin somehow paled in the fading light. The last thing I remember before the snakes came, before my body was lost both to the sea and to knowledge, a reflection of myself in the eyes of that cruel God, the imprint of his hands, hot and red as the sea on my neck, the chill of them first touching my face, the press and dead fish stink of that salty mouth, lips rough and cold as the jagged rocks of the deep against my collarbone. Picture a girl built pretty and open like a temple only to be destroyed. Be kind. You are looking at ruins further ruined. What I mean to say is that the swift kiss of your sword on my neck is not unfamiliar, Perseus. I have tasted the sharp, quick pain of a man before. And that's hashtag Medusa was black, y'all. How do you know in a moment or lived experience is a poem? Ooh, I think when I get a little bit obsessed, I'm like, why did this happen? Why did this happen? Or I'm like talking to several different people about something, then I'm like, maybe I should write about it. Maybe I'm like going down like a poetic spiral right now, So sometimes that happens. Um, Sometimes it's just it like hits me in a moment. There's a poem in the book where the speaker goes to a Broadway show and it's like someone makes a racially insensitive comment, and sometimes those moments activate me to write a poem, so it kind of just depends. I try to listen to moments when I get activated to do something, or if I'm like just I can't get something out of my head, I always tell my students like follow your obsessions, because they're gonna take you somewhere, um and so I think a moment that is a lived experience can become a poem for me if there's like some sort of maybe not a lesson, but like a message that needs to be communicated, um, or something that needs to be understood in a deeper way that I'm trying to understand. A lot of the times it's like emotional situations where I'm trying to like dissect them, I kind of sort of think of myself as like a social scientist. So I'm like, how does this all like work? Why would they say that? Why would they do these things, and so putting it in a poem sort of helps me to be able to unpack things, um, in a deeper way, Sometimes something will happen and I know it's supposed to be a poem, but I don't know what kind of poem it's supposed to be, you know? Like I don't quite know the form yet. Like I'm like, I know I want to write a poem about X, Y, and Z, but I don't know quite what the right way to do that is. Um, Sometimes I'll like get an idea and like for instance with the short story that I published, it was supposed to be a poem, but it would have been such a weird poem. And I sat on the idea for a long time and I was like trying to finagle it, and then once I think the author of the editor of this magazine was like, "Hey, why don't you write me a short?" And I was like, well, I do have that weird poem that doesn't seem to work as a poem, that maybe I could turn it to a short story. So I ended up taking the poem and turning it into a short story. So I think it's like sometimes the form needs to be made clear somehow, you know, too. Thank you for that question. It's one I think about all the time, as you can probably tell. Let's see. Oh, something from Megan in the chat. I've been lucky enough to hear you read like half a dozen times in the past few months, and your reading voice is incredible. Writing the poem is one skill, but speaking/reading the poem is a completely different skill. How did you cultivate that reading out aloud skill? I always want to read the poem in the same tenor that I wrote it. And the way that it sort of in my head, and I do workshop poems, you know, by ear, once I get to a certain point. And so the way that it sounds is very important, and the way I'm orchestrating it to sound is very important. So I've also studied other poets whom I admire their delivery, and I am, trying to deliver my poems in those way. Like Jericho Brown is a huge inspiration for me. I could watch him read the phone book, like he's just like so tender in the way that he reads his poetry, and it's so like emotional and it just like pulls you in closer. It's off like, how does he do that? So I'm like studying him and how he reads, and how he delivers poetry. And so I try to study the artists that I feel like do it well. Music is a great influence for me. So I kind of thought of this book as an album. And so when I'm like reading it, I am sort of trying to operate within that tenor as well. Who are some of your other favorite poets? I have so many favorite poets. Jericho Brown is one of them, of course. He's influenced me deeply. When I was a much younger poet, um, one of the poets that was like very instrumental in my development was Frank O'Hara. Like I was so obsessed with Frank O'Hara. I would read his poems, I would carry them around, I would treat his poetry like Mad Libs. Like I would take out all the adjectives and all the verbs, and then I would like go back in and I like put my spin on it. I would overwrite his poems. I would do imitations of them so I could understand exactly how the poem was moving, what he was doing, how he was structuring language. I wanted to like capture like the cadence of that. And so a lot of my earlier poems very much are like sort of like in the spirit of O'Hara. So he was like very, very, very important to me, like as I was developing as a poet. Toy Derricott is another poet that was like very instrumental in my development, but that was later when I was in grad school at UNO with Carolyn Hembry, who had us read which was a collection of poetry by Toy Derricott, or is a collection of poetry by Toy Derricott. It's like her collected works, and I read the poems and I just got super activated. I was like, like I literally was like reading the book and like shaking. Like I was like, oh my God, like, what is this? I was like, this is what I want to do. And so she kind of set me on a course. I love a poet that's gonna like set me on some kind of course, you know. And so those were our poets that are really, and there's so many of them, but those are, the ones that really come to mind that had such an instrumental sort of effect on me, with the way that they do language, in this beautiful way. And I don't know, I just like I'm always operating as a student. So I'm like, what can I learn? Like, I remember Jericho Brown saying to me once, like, you can even learn something from a poem that's bad. And I was like, what? I was like, what? But then I'm like, oh my God, you can't. you know? So there's always something to learn, from a piece of writing. So I just, I would say those three are probably like my trinity, of poets. There are many more, but those are the three that have like really influenced a lot about how I write, how I read, how I, present my poetry in front of audiences and things of that sort. So yeah, great question. All right, I'm checking to see if there's any hands raised here or anything in the chat. Go back to the book. Unless, oh man, there you are. Hello.
Maybe I'm oh yeah, there I am. Okay, cool. I was just gonna say, we're coming up on like an hour now.
Yes.
Maybe one more round of questions, and then I'll close us out with some announcements. So if
All
y'all
right.
have any burning questions, it's time to let them burn.
Yeah,
And
or if anyone has any requests for poems, like,
oh yeah.
I'm happy to read any requests, anything you might want to hear. Please feel free to put it in the chat. I'm open to that. I'm always curious about what people want to hear. I'm trying not to read the same poems over and over again. So that there's like a varieties. The title
Oh,
poem.
I just got one.
Okay, yeah, I can read Libre. Now it's a longer poem. I just warn everybody of this that it's a prose poem. Um, and it is, let's see, let me fit it in the back here. So I wrote it in the spirit or after Claudia Rankine because I love her work so much. She uses poetic language to talk about very uncomfortable subjects, and I just kind of like went down this rabbit hole, like reading Citizen and reading Claudia Rankine and just like, how can I do that? Like, how do I want to do that too? But I didn't have a window. I didn't have at the time, I was like, I don't know how I would do this. And so um, this poem is based on an experience I had in Key West where I got the experience. I was like, yep, this is it. This is the thing. So that's pretty much all you need to know uh, to get into this poem. Okay. Libre, after Claudia Rankine. While in Key West for a writing residency, you meet a 73-year-old white man. You're sitting outside of a dive bar composing poems for strangers on a manual typewriter when he takes a picture of you without asking. He asks if he can send it to you on Facebook. You say sure. A few days later, he sends you the picture and tells you it went viral in a Key West Facebook group that has not accepted you yet, although you applied for entry days ago. It will be any time now, he tells you. He asks if you are going to see the new editor of a premier literary magazine's Craft Talk and reading at the college outside of town. You have planned to go for weeks now, so you say yes. He asks if you need a ride there. You are hesitant, but you do need a ride. The campus is too far to reach on your bike. He says, if you want, you can go to the readings together and he will treat you to dinner. For some reason you can't pinpoint, you feel uneasy, but still say, okay. Days later, you both go to the craft talk. Everything seems fine. Afterwards, you and the old white man go meet the editor for dinner and drinks before his reading starts. There is not much time, only about an hour before he is scheduled to read his poetry on stage. You and the editor are the only two Black people at the table of five. You try to make the most of the time and fill the air with congratulations and small talk. The old white man speaks about affirmative action and how Key West was never part of the Confederacy. You wonder why he needs to speak of these things right now, in this moment. The editor leaves to prepare for his reading. All is well. The old white man pays the tab, and suddenly you are on the back of his scooter, passing by warm blue waves of water and an abandoned boat called Freedom, once manned by a group of Cubans escaping to America. The old white man breaks the silence. Wow, he says, that guy was so nice. You agree and tell him that he was just named the first Black editor of a top-tier literary magazine. In their long history, they've never had a Black editor. Oh, that's nice, the old white man says, but he's not black. You feel like you've been hit in the stomach as your long, thick twists whip around you in the breeze. Excuse me, you say, tightening your grip on his shoulders and steadying yourself on the scooter. What is that supposed to mean? Well, he says, clearing his throat and speaking as casually as though he were commenting on the weather. His diction is very good, and he seems quite worldly. You don't even know where to begin with this. So you say he grew up in the Netherlands. With a pit deepening in your stomach, you tell this white man that the editor has lived all over the world. Nice, the old white man says again. You are lost in your thoughts when you realize he is turning the scooter around. You are no longer headed to the reading. Now you are going to some other place. You feel like the blonde teenager in that Joyce Carol Oates story. Don't know where you're going, don't know where you've been. He stops the scooter by the boat you passed minutes ago, the one with freedom scrawled in white on the side. The sun is setting into the water. It is getting dark. You wonder why you cannot speak. I'd like to take a picture of you next to the boat, he says, motioning towards it. You can't swallow, but you hand him your phone. You stand next to the boat called Freedom, the wooden pieces of the hull jutting out into the soft sand. He takes the picture. He takes several pictures. You do not smile. You are holding back something inside you. You want to say things, but you cannot say things. Suddenly, you are back on the scooter, though you do not remember climbing on it. The old white man takes a deep, long breath. He tells you that he loves your perfume, that you smell so good. In your head, you say, it's called Libre. To him, you say, nothing. And that's Libre, the title poem. Oh, Megan, you put a picture of the bow up. I'm clicking on it.
Yeah, there's a whole article about Triumph and Freedom, the names of the boats. But yeah, Libertad is, I was like, oh my God, that's the boat.
That's the boat. That's the boat. There is a picture of me somewhere with the boat too. I have to find it. I don't like to look at that picture for obvious reasons, but that photo does actually exist. Of me standing next to the boat called Freedom.
And I also just I really love that poem because you can take that sort of ordinary, broken down, gross boat on a beach somewhere and make something really beautiful out of it with your poetry, you know?
Yeah, I think that's important, like with the story of the boat, I think
Mhm.
it moved me seeing it, so yeah.
Any other final thoughts, questions? Anybody? Before we go get dinner, because it's 7 o'clock. Okay. And obviously, if you think of questions while I'm talking, drop them in the chat, but I will just do some announcements. April's going to be busy. So, April 1st, One Book is in two places at once. We are at Wednesdays at the Square with the YLC from 5 to 8. And then from 7 to 10, we're at Cafe Istanbul with Songs for the People. And that Songs for the People actually benefits us. They pick a different nonprofit every time they do it. And this month it's us. We're really honored. So thank you to Saria Dunn and all the folks who will be reading at that and playing their music. Let's see. And then on April 7th, we've got Pelicans and Poetry. The
Exciting.
Pelicans are partnering with us to do the first ever poetry reading at an NBA game ever, which is amazing. So if you guys go on our ticket link and buy tickets, you can come to the poetry reading beforehand. It's a happy hour. You can also support us because $5 of your ticket purchase will go to One Book One New Orleans. I am trying to multitask and talk at the same time while I get that up so I can link that in the chat as well. And then on April 11th, we're doing a little something with our NEA grant. It's the final event in that programming where Alison Pellegrin, who is the former poet laureate, who's been really instrumental in getting poetry in jails and prisons, will be doing a workshop and we'll be sharing some work that's called Our Louisiana Landscape. You can follow us on Eventbrite and you'll get that. And also, of course, if you're subscribed to our newsletter, you'll find it there as well. And then our social media. Phew. And then Skye is over here being chairperson of the New Orleans Poetry Festival. So check all of that out and know that her organizational skills have helped make a lot of it happen. Mad props to Skye for organizing a really huge literary event in April. Right after that, we'll be doing something with Libre on the 21st. And then we go straight into Jazz Fest and no one's working then. So
Yeah.
April
We're
1st
all
through
festin'.
21st, we'll be doing all the things. Yes, and then we're festing. Check us out on the socials. Check us out on our newsletter. You can find us pretty much anywhere. We're not hard to pin down. Thank you all for being here tonight. And I want to give a special shout out to Latoya Taylor, our board chair, who, when my internet connection started acting funky, took over as host. The only reason this thing went well is because her connection works. So thank you, Latoya, for always having our back, even when no one else sees it. She's right there with that stable internet connection, holding it down. Thank you, Latoya.
Thank you,
And
Latoya.
even though it's not a one book event, shout out to Ellen Morris Pruitt on the 2nd of April. She is dropping her book, The When We Were Murderous Time Traveling Women. So if you're at the
Such a great
Orange
title.
Couch on April 2nd, check her out. She was in here earlier. She may have left. I'll be emceeing the reading. It's really great. I love this book. So y'all come out to all the stuff in April. We hope to see you there. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting One Book. Thank you for creating community through reading. It only works when community is present. So thank you all for believing in what we do and spending a night of poetry with us. Thank you. Thank you, Jasmine.
Coming. Thank you for the awesome questions. Y'all are great. It was so great to be here with y'all tonight.
Yes, thanks, Skye.
All right. Oh, you're welcome.